Hi, Senior League golfers. My name's Jim Markin, and I'm with several members of our golf league who are with me today to talk about the rules and golf etiquette. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, the people who will be joining me. Tim Murphy.
Morning, folks.
Rich Sultanfuss.
Hi, everybody.
Vicki Loring.
Good morning.
And the person behind the camera, Dan Bouchard.
Hi. Hey.
I want to make a special thanks, first of all, for this video to two people who were really instrumental. First is Tim, who suggested the idea. And second is Dan, who will be putting together the video for us. He'll not only be serving as the camera person, but he'll actually be producing the video. What we're going to do today is go around the course, hole by hole, and on each hole we're going to illustrate 3 or 4 different topics as they relate to either rules or etiquette. So that'll be our key focus for today. 2 things I want to highlight before we go out though, as it relates to rules. When we talk about rules in golf, there are a lot of rules. In our league, we don't want to be too rules conscious. So what we want to do is have a relaxed set of rules, but we want them to be consistent. So we will be illustrating today the type of rules that our league uses. For the most part, we use USGA rules, United States Golf Association, and those are the typical rules you play in golf. However, in our league, we have several different variations, primarily for 2 reasons. One is for safety purposes, to avoid injury, and the other is to keep up the pace of play. And so much of what we'll talk about today will be some of the exceptions to the rules that we use in our league. The second thing we want to talk about a little bit is golf etiquette. We're a very large league now, over 100 players, and we realize we have a great variance in terms of the amount of time people have played golf. We know many of you have taken up the game in recent years, and we commend you for that. And we also know there's some people who have played golf for more than 50 years. So we have a wide variety, and so we'll try to go over some of the basic rules for etiquette. The last thing I want to illustrate or mention before we begin is we think this will be a great idea and give a lot of people some tips, but we don't want to overwhelm anybody. So for our new golfers who are just starting out, if you can get 3 or 4 good tips from watching this video, that's great, but don't be overly concerned if you're trying to remember every rule that we're talking about today. Some of the players who have played the game a long time can help you along the way. With that, we'll move to the first tee and begin. We're starting on hole number 1, and we have 3 things we want to talk about on hole number 1. The first thing we want to talk about is which tee markers to play. Now, this course has 3 tee markers: the whites, the reds, and the blues. For the most part, the men play the white tee markers, the ladies play the red tee markers, and if you meet certain age requirements, you're allowed to play the blue tee markers, which are a little difficult to find sometimes because they're about 50 yards ahead of the red tee markers and kind of submerged in the ground. So we'll start out by looking at Tim and Rich, who are on the white tee markers. Vicki is on the red tee marker, and no one right now is on the blue, but we'll show you where it is a little later. The next thing we're going to cover today is what happens if your ball goes in the woods. Unfortunately, all too often on our first hole, a lot of players end up in the woods to the right. And so we're going to demonstrate how you play the ball from the inside if you're going to take a penalty stroke and your ball's in the woods and you decide not to play it in the woods. You have that option if you wish to play it in the woods, but oftentimes it's to your benefit not to try to do so, to avoid injury, and usually it doesn't even help your game score. The third and final point we're going to cover on hole number 1 is we're going to talk about what you do if you reach the maximum score. And we would like to announce at this point we are making a change for next year. In the past, our maximum score has been double par, which means for a par 3 it's a 6, for a par 4 it's an 8, and for a 1 par 5 it's a 10. We're going to be changing the rule next year to triple bogey is a max score per hole. That means on a par 3 it's still a 6, but on a par 4 it's now a 7, and on a par 5 or 1 par 5 it's now a 8, not a 10. So we're going to cover that, and we'll show you that you should be picking up your ball if you reach that number at that point.
Okay, so my ball's in the woods. I have the choice of hitting it, which probably isn't going to work here because there are too many trees, or I can drop it 2 club lengths from where it entered the woods. That's what I'm going to do. And I go 2 club lengths, again, no closer to the hole, and then I drop from my knee right there. Now, even though I'm in the rough, I can have a preferred lie. So I can move the ball with my club just to give myself a better shot. So I'm going to do that. Now it's my turn. Because I've taken the ball out of the woods, it's a 1-stroke penalty. So I add 1 stroke to my total score for the hole.
And I'm lying 6 right here. I'm about to hit my 7th shot. If I don't knock it into the hole, I will walk up to the green and just pick up the ball because I will have reached the triple bogey score. Feet from the hole, that was my 7th shot. I'm going to pick up, mark a 7 on my scorecard, and go on to the next hole.
Hi, we're now on hole number 2, and we're going to cover several things on hole number 2. The first thing we're going to talk about is the tee markers and which ones you should play if they're a little further back than normal. And sometimes this happens on Monday, and Tim will explain how we actually do that. The next thing, though, I do want to talk about is etiquette tip number 1, and that is who should play first when you go to a hole. Now, typically in the rules of golf, 2 things come into play. The first is the person who had the best score on the last hole usually tees off first. That's called having honors. So if somebody had a 5 on hole number 1 and somebody had a 6, usually the person with the 5 goes first. The other thing that usually happens is the person who's furthest away from the hole goes before the other. Since the men's tees are a little further back than the ladies, generally the men go first and the ladies second. However, in our league, we're very flexible. As long as you have an agreement among the 4 players who goes first, that's fine with us. It's sometimes called the concept of ready golf. And we're very open to playing ready golf if the whole foursome agrees to that. So, as I say, generally that's the way that it works, but if the group agrees on a certain pattern, we're fine with that. So, the other important thing we're going to talk about on this hole when we get near the green is what happens when you're near a tree. That's one of our variances that we play in our league because we don't want people getting injured hitting trees. So when we get near the greens, we'll talk about how we do that.
Okay, I tee off from the white tee markers. Now on Tuesday, the grounds crew moves those tee markers up much closer to the red tee markers than they are here. So to be fair to the golfers who play on Monday, we can ignore where this tee marker is and tee off 10 yards or so behind the red tee markers. Now we don't move the tee markers. They stay there for other golfers who follow the league. So what I will do is I will walk up 10 yards or so behind the red tee markers and I will tee off from there. So this is about it. Very often it's halfway between the 2 tee markers. There we go. So you see I'm 10 yards behind the red markers, and now I'll hit.
We're going to talk about a special rule that only comes into play on rainy and muddy days. If we have a rainy and muddy day, there's a special rule that's called lift, clean, and place. And the reason it's in play is if your ball gets submerged or very muddy, you're allowed to pick up the ball, to clean it off, and to place it down. This will only take place on rainy, muddy days, and your starter will be the one that lets you know if we're playing lift, clean, and place that day. So Vicki will demonstrate what you should do.
Try to get it out of the hole. And find a preferred lie. Well, the pine tree on 2 has once again impeded a swing. So I can move all 2 club lengths from the tree, but no closer to the hole. So there's 1 and 2. Let's see if this helps any.
Okay, now my ball is under the spruce tree, so I get free relief from that spot, and I can move the ball up to 2 club lengths from that spot, again without penalty, to give myself relief and a free swing. So if I mark 2 club lengths, I can move the ball anywhere within that 2 club length distance. And for me, this would be a good spot. Not the full 2 club lengths, but I still get relief. And the tree is no longer impeding my swing.
Directly behind a tree, but because I have freedom of swing, the tree does not impede my swing. I do not get relief. I cannot move the ball. I need to hit it from here. Now, I can roll it over no more than 12 inches, like you can anywhere on the course. However, I can't move it from that tree. I have to hit from here. So it's impossible for me to go for the green, so I'm just gonna pop it out front.
Hi, we're now on hole number 3, which is a par 4. Remember, since we have the triple bogey rule, this is a hole now that your max score would be 7, not 8. What we're going to focus in on this hole is we're going to talk about playing the ball near fences. Fences come into play 2 places on this hole. One is on the top of the hill, and one is by the green on the bottom of the hill. And we will demonstrate how you play the ball near the fence in both situations.
Okay, on the 3rd hole, often people will end up against this fence, which separates the course from the dentist's office. So you have a choice here. You can play the ball, but you do get relief from the fence and from these poles. So you can move the ball if you decide to play it.
Yeah.
1, 2, drop the ball. And now I can play it. I have an open area right over here. I just pop it out there.
Now my ball is also up against the fence on hole number 3, and I've decided rather than using a stroke and trying to punch it out into the middle of the fairway, I'm simply going to pick the ball up, carry it over to the drop area, and play from the drop area with a 1-stroke penalty. So the net result on the score for the hole will be the same as if I tried to hit it out, but I have a much safer shot into the green by putting it in the drop zone.
Okay, so here we are on 4 against the fence, which is a typical place, unfortunately. So obviously the swing is impeded here. So again, without penalty, you can move the ball 2 club lengths as long as it's no closer to the pin. Try to tip it up there.
Okay, so my ball ended up in the street, so I'm going to pick it up, and there's a penalty area just off the side of the green. I'm going to carry it over, drop it in the penalty area for a 1-stroke penalty, and hit to the green from the penalty area.
Is a blind shot, meaning that the people on the hill can't see the green. You have to let them know that you have left the green and that it's safe for them to hit. Behind the tee plaque here is a bell. You just walk up and give it a good ring. That lets them know you've left the green and it's safe for them to hit. Now, if you're up on the 3rd fairway, you need to wait until you hear the bell before you hit.
Hi, this is hole number 4, and we're going to actually demonstrate 4 tips for this hole. The first is what happens if you accidentally hit your ball. The second tip we're going to talk about is if you happen to go through the woods into the street on this hole. The third is we're going to talk about what happens if your ball ends up in a ditch. There is a ditch near the hole by the green. And finally, and very importantly, we're going to show one of the most important etiquette tips, and that is where you should leave your cart when you're putting.
I'm here on the tee getting ready for my tee shot. And if I swing at the ball and I miss, but I was intending to hit the ball, that counts as a stroke. If it was a practice swing, it doesn't count as a stroke. Now, if I'm lining up and I'm just waggling a little bit and I happen to hit the ball, that does not count as a stroke. That's an accidental strike, and you can just replace the ball on the tee and then tee off.
On the fourth hole, there's a road that runs along the left side. And with a little hook, it's easy to hit it out into the road. But if you hit a car, don't worry, your homeowners will take care of it. Your option here is to drop 2 club lengths from the edge of the trees. Normally you would drop from the edge of the sidewalk, but in our league, it's from the edge of the trees. This differs from the USGA rules. So I'm going to get another ball because my other ball's gone down the road, and I'm going to do 2 club lengths over, drop the ball, and then I can again take a preferred lie so I get a good lie, and then I hit to the green.
Okay, so on 4 we also have a lovely ditch, and our options with the ditch are to remove it 2 club lengths, no closer to the hole. You're familiar, so that is my choice. So I'm going to go 1, well, no more than 2 club lengths, so I'm going to put it right here in a nice line and give it a shot.
I've hit my ball in the front of the green, so I would think the easiest thing to do is to take my cart, put it right there, and putt the ball. But in fact, that's the worst thing I could do, because I'm going to putt to the hole, then I'm going to have to walk all the way back and get my bag, which is going to delay the people who are on the tee waiting to hit. The worst place to store your bag when you're putting is in the front of the green.
Now, I've also hit my approach shot to the front of the green. I walked my bag a little bit further, closer to the next tee, which will save a few steps, but it still would have been better if I'd walked it up to the next tee.
I too have hit up to the front of the green, but before I came up to address the putt, I placed my cart between the pin and the next tee box to save steps and to have it out of the line of play.
Hi, we're on hole number 5, and there's a few things I want to mention about hole number 5. The first is, remember, this is the only par 5 on the course, and with our new rules, the maximum amount of strokes per hole is 8 now, not 10 on this hole. So should you reach 8, please pick up your ball at that point. The other 3 things we're going to cover is we're going to cover what do you do if you hit your ball in the woods from the tee. We're also going to cover what do you do if your ball ends up near some tree roots. And finally, we're going to cover if you're at the top of the hole and you see gaps in play, what should happen. Those are
Okay, I'm teeing off on number 5. And I hit a terrible shot. It went into the woods. Do not take a provisional tee shot, which means hitting a second ball while you look for your first one. And if you don't find the first one, then you would hit the second shot that you hit. It takes too much time. If your ball goes into the woods, you have 2 minutes to look for it. If you can't find it within the 2 minutes, then you take a drop 2 club lengths outside of the woods for a 1-stroke penalty.
Sometimes your ball will end up near a root, and this is one of the most important safety rules we have in the league. If your ball is near a root so that your swing could hit the root and result in often a broken wrist, you are able to move the ball from the roots 2 club lengths, not closer to the hole, with no penalty. So my ball's here. I'm going to move it over 1, 2 club lengths. This area is root free, and so I can hit from here without a penalty.
So I'm at the top of the hill on hole number 5, about to hit my approach shot into the green. I'm looking down the fairway, and I don't see anybody coming up the fairway. So that group is probably a little bit behind schedule. And I'm looking up at the tee for number 6, and I don't see anybody on the tee, but I see them heading towards the green on number 6. So my group is a little bit behind schedule, and we should pick up the pace a little bit to keep the game moving.
Hi, we're now on hole number 6, and we're going to talk about a few things on hole number 6. The first thing we're going to talk about is the second rules change. We talked about earlier about maximum strokes. This time we're going to put another new rule in place, which I think everybody's going to like, or at least the people who have been hitting from the red tees. We're going to, for those people who have been hitting from the red tees, we're now going to be hitting from the blue tees on this hole. The reason being, this is just too long of a hole for most people to reach from the red tees. It's about 160 yards. It's 110 yards from the blue tees, which is consistent with the other par 3s. So we'll go there next to talk about hitting from the blue tees. On this hole, we'll also talk about what happens if you're near the fence. And finally, we're going to talk about an etiquette rule about where you should do your scoring.
Okay.
Great news on the 6th hole, where everyone has at some point in their lives, probably more than once, said this should be a par 4. The ladies are now going to be driving from the blue tees if that's their choice. So happy to say I happen to think it's a great rule change. I still go to the tee.
Okay. Again, on the 6th hole, the same fence that was in play at 3 comes back to haunt you again. So my ball is right up against the fence, because this time I hit a slice instead of hooking it. So I get relief from the fence because the fence will impede my swing. So I can bring it 2 club lengths away from the fence, no closer to the hole. But in doing so here, I find that this is in the path of my swing, so I need to find a different place to drop the ball. So maybe I got to go back this way. 1 club length, 2 club lengths, I drop the ball. It's a little in my way, but I can probably swing, so I'm going to. Pull. So what am I going to do? I'm up against the fence again. I'm better off just going over to the drop zone. Now this is a 1-stroke penalty. Round circle here. I drop my ball, which is up against the fence, and then I hit from here.
My tee shot on number 6 has landed against the fence that's behind the green. Now this is a little tricky. You get free relief from the fence, so you get 2 club lengths, but it has to be done in such a way as not to get any closer to the hole. So you have to go at a slight angle, but keep it as slight as possible to move the ball, give yourself a free swing, but not make it any closer to the hole.
Should I get relief from the holes if they're in my way?
So if somebody were to actually measure that, I might be an inch or 2 closer to the hole, but at least now I have a free swing and I'm not going to hurt myself.
Okay, good. What we're going to demonstrate now is about scoring. When you finish a hole, what you should be doing is scoring on the next tee. What we do not want to happen is what Tim is doing right now in scoring near the pin, because that delays play. Nor should we really be doing on the side of the green where Rich is currently and scoring here, because again, people have to wait and hit until Rich moves. The proper way of doing it is where Vicky is now doing it. She's moving to the next tee, and not until she reaches the next tee will she actually do the scoring. We have now arrived at hole number 7, and we'll again be covering a few tips. One thing before we go, though, I do want to mention, I haven't mentioned earlier today, one of the things, this is a friendly league, and we want to avoid at all costs, is people giving unsolicited advice, telling people what clubs to hit or whatever that. We do not want that to occur in our league. If somebody wants advice and they ask somebody, that's great, but please do not offer any advice unless somebody asks you for it. One other thing that some of experienced golfers may be aware of and some of the inexperienced golfers may not be, but oftentimes when you play a course on a par 3, there's something called waving people up, so that when people are on the tee, the people who are on the green step back and wave the people up. We do not use that approach in our league. So for those experienced golfers, we do not wave people up. What we'd like to cover on this hole is we want to cover one big tick that most people try to avoid, which is the sand trap. So we're going to talk about what happens if your ball is in the sand trap, and we're also going to talk about one more etiquette piece about not walking in somebody's line of putt.
Okay, I'm in the sand trap on number 7, and there are a few recommendations for playing from a sand trap. My ball is right underneath the lip of the trap, and I would not have a very free swing to hit this ball. So because of our preferred lie policy, I can use my club head and move it about 12 inches away from the lip. Still not a perfect lie, but it's better than it was, and now I could play that. Another issue is if you're in somebody else's ball mark or foot mark where they didn't rake out the sand trap after they played, you can move the ball up to 2 club lengths, no closer to the hole, to get a better stance. And if that spot happens to have very little sand, you can do the same thing. One other issue in the trap on number 7, there is a traffic cone. That indicates that there's some issue with that section of the trap. If you're close to that cone, you get up to 2 club lengths relief, no closer to the hole, without taking a penalty.
Rich, would you bet?
The 2 club length move of the ball has to keep the ball within the trap. You can't move the ball out onto the grass. And
Okay, it's my turn to putt. My ball's over there. I have to get to it. I could walk straight line across, right across where Vicky has to putt. In doing that, my spike marks, even though they're not metal spikes, can still disturb the ground around her putt. So what I should do is, instead of walking across, I should walk behind Vicky over to my ball, not disturbing her line of her putt. And then I get up here, putt, and knock it in the hole.
So a fairly new rule this year was that if we hit from the tee, if your ball goes less than 10 yards from the tee in your drive, you can bring it back and re-hit it. You can hit a second drive, but you will take a stroke. So you can choose to either play it or add a stroke and try again.
We're going to be talking about putting today on the 8th hole, and we have actually 4 things we want to discuss. Number 1, we want to emphasize there are no gimmies. So that means you have to putt out every hole, even if you're a short distance away. So that's number 1, remember that. The second thing is, in rare cases, and I want to emphasize rare, if you have the pin in and it's really tilted to one side, it's possible that it could hit the pin and not go in, and it would have gone in if the pin were not there. So what we'll do is, if that's the case, and all 4 players agree it would have gone in without the pin being in the hole, we can count it as good. Remember, it's got to be, 1, you're putting from on the green. If it's off the green, it doesn't matter. And 2, if it's going too hard and just hits the pin and goes off a distance, that's not good, because you just hit it too hard. But if it's going the right speed, and because the pin was at an angle, it didn't go in, and everybody agrees, then it would be counted as good.
Now, if I putt and my ball doesn't go in, and I'm comfortable from this distance finishing up, then even though I'm actually putting out of sequence, I can finish up. If I'm not comfortable, I can mark the ball and let the next player putt.
It's my turn to putt and the pin is in. I have the option of leaving the pin in and putting. And you're probably going to want to do that on a long putt. However, in a short putt like this, you can take the pin out. My Monday partner has convinced me that the hole looks bigger with the pin out, so you probably want to take it out. So Rich is going to take it out for me. I get up and I put it in. See, the hole was big.
Hi, we've come to the end of our round. This is hole number 9, and we're going to finish up with 3 more tips. Tip number 1 has to do with what happens if you're on bare ground. How do you play the shot? Number 2 is what happens if you actually go out of bounds. On hole number 9, there's an out of bounds along the right where we have condos. In fact, 2 of our members live in those condos. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about the importance of comparing scorecards at the end of the round. So those are the
Okay, so here on number 9, I've driven it under the big trees, and there's very little grass here. Now, in some cases, within the 2 club length rule, you'll be able to move your ball without penalty 2 club lengths and get onto grass. If, however, you still are not in a decent place after 2 club lengths, just pick up your ball, find the first decent patch of grass and drop it and play it from there. And that's without penalty. You can still use the 12-inch preferred lie to get it even in a better position.
Well, in the unlikely event that you ever hit out of bounds, there really is no option but we have to take it 2 club lengths from the out of bounds line, the boundary. So we'll start there with, of course, the longest club, no closer to the pin, and I think that's a nice little lie. I'll add 1 stroke, as I said, and hope for the best.
Okay, so we finished our round and now it's time to total up the scores. You don't do that here on the course. You go down to the first tee and there's a little bench there, and we're headed that way now. And what you will do is you will total up all the scores for all 4 players. And the captain of the other team, who is responsible for keeping their score, will total the score for all 4 players. Then you will compare the scores to make sure it's accurate. So you go right over here to do that.
Well, thank you for taking the time and watching this video, and hopefully getting a few pointers along the way. I do want to mention before I forgot to mention on the first tee that the 5th member of our league leadership team, Gene Hollis, was not able to be with us today because he is traveling out of state with his wife. Otherwise, he would have been with us. But on behalf of all of my colleagues here, we thank you for watching this. We hope you are able to get some good pointers along the way. And again, if you're a relatively new golfer, don't be overwhelmed with trying to remember everything. It'll come in time. Thank you for watching.